In this video, I'm going to talk about add and remove methods in a circular single linked list. Let's say that we start from an empty circular single linked list. In this case, head and tail are both pointing at null. If we want to add a node with the data 20 to our empty linked list, first we have to create a node with the data 20, and then the next pointer of 20 should point at null initially. Then we're gonna point the head pointer and the tail pointer to point at the node that we have just created, and then the next pointer of 20 to point at whatever head is pointing at. The reason for that is to keep our linked list circular. Now let's say that we want to add a node with the data 5 into our linked list and we want to put it at the end of our linked list. The way to do it is to make a node with the data 5 and point its next pointer to point at null initially. And because our linked list is circular, we know that that whatever is at the end of our linked list is gonna point at the head of our linked list. So now 5's next pointer should be should look at the head of the linked list. Now the next thing that we do is to look at the tail and see what tail is pointing at. Now we set the next pointer of whatever tail is pointing at to point at the node that we have just created. So 20's next pointer is gonna point at the node that we have just created, which is node 5. Now the next step is to also change the tail pointer to point at the node that we have just created. The reason for that is that 5 is at the end of our linked list, and tail should always point at the element which is at the end of our linked list. So tail should point at 5 here. Now let's say that we want to add a node with the data -2 at index 1 in our linked list. The indices in linked list work like this. The head is gonna point at index 0, then the next element is gonna be index 1, the next element is gonna be index 2, the next element is gonna be index 3, and so on. So the first step to do that is to make a node with data -2 and point its next pointer to point at null initially. Then we're gonna look at the head, which is the index 0 in our linked list. Because it's index 0, we know that the next element that we are going to see, it's going to be position 1, and that is the position that we want to put our -2 in it. So the first thing that we do is to point the -2's next to point at 20's next. So -2 is going to point at 5, and the next pointer of 20 we're going to change it to point at -2. Now if I rearrange the shape a little bit, I'm gonna get something like this. And as you see, 20 is at position 0, -2 is at position 1, and 5 is at position 2. Now as you see, tail is pointing at 5, no change there, and head is pointing at 20, we don't have any change there, and 5 is also pointing at whatever the head is pointing at, and that is the property that is going to keep our linked list circular. Now let's say that we want to add the node with the data 32 to the end of our linked list. Because we're adding something to the end of our circular linked list, we're gonna make that node, and we're gonna put the 32's next pointer to point at the head. So that is the first step for adding something to the end of a circular linked list, because we want to keep the linked list to be circular. So 32's next pointer is pointing at whatever the head is pointing at, and then we're gonna look at the tail of our linked list and point the next pointer of the tail to point at whatever we have just created. So 5's next pointer is gonna point at 32, and as you know from the previous step, 32 is gonna point at whatever the head is pointing at. Now the next step is to also change the tail pointer, because we have added something to the end of our linked list. So the tail pointer is going to point at whatever we have just created, which is 32. Now let's say that we want to remove some stuff from our linked list. Let's say we want to remove the last element of our linked list. Now to do that, we have to look at whatever tail is pointing at, and also start from the head of our linked list until we get to the tail. The reason for doing that is because we have a singly circular linked list. If it was doubly circular linked list, then looking at tail would be sufficient, and we could just do some pointer manipulation to get to our goal. But here we have to start from the head and see if we are at the we are seeing the node at the tail of our linked list or not. So we're gonna check the node that we're seeing right now against the tail. So is the node 20 is equal to whatever is at the tail? We say no. So we're gonna move on to the next element, which is -2. Is -2 whatever we have at the tail? No, it's not. So we're gonna move on to the next element, which is 5. Is 5 at the end of our linked list? We say no. We go to the next element and we see that 32 is whatever the tail is pointing at. Now in this case, remember that we still have a pointer to 5. So what we do is to point the next pointer of 5 to point at head, and also reset the tail pointer to point at 5. Now 32 is unreachable, and we can just get rid of it. Now our linked list looks something like this.